Okay, welcome to another episode of GovUNLEASHED. I'm your host, Woodrow Sanders. Joining me today are two very special guests. Amie Ichikawa, she's the founder and executive director for Woman to Woman, a nonprofit organization created by formerly incarcerated women. Her organization advocates for the safety and dignity of female prisoners, helps them prepare for their parole hearings, and provides reentry support services for those transitioning back into society. My next guest is Dr. Mahri Irvine. She's the executive director for the Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF for short. Her organization touts itself as the nation's largest radical feminist, nonpartisan nonprofit fighting for total liberation of women and girls. Their mission is to protect, restore, and advance the rights of women and girls through legal argument, policy advocacy, and public education. Ladies, welcome to the podcast. So, Miss Ichikawa, let's start with you. Oh, Amie. Amie, I guess Amie's okay. I'll probably even refer to each other as Amie Woodrow. So, Amie, let's start with you. So, please describe for my audience the impetus behind Woman to Woman and the services your organization provides.
When I came home from prison, there was a really big void. There was a lack of services that were available or readily available to women. The ones that were readily available were very male-centered, and years passed before I really made the connection that I was going to have to make them myself. There just became a greater need. And we do need different services. There's, men and women are different, and we wanted to design services that were specifically around the female experience post-incarceration. There's not a lot of mental health services either, so I think peer support plays a really huge role in a successful recovery or a successful transition back to the free world. Because there's a lot of stigma that comes with being fresh out. You don't want to burden anybody with constant questions. Tech literacy is a really big deal for us. So we definitely want to help people walk through the shock of all the new tech that's out. It's a vital part of being functioning members of society to be able to use the tech and understand it. So we're really working with that to help people be familiar with the things so you can, go to jobs and not be intimidated by how much has changed in the last, 10, 20, sometimes over 20 years. On top of that, we do a lot of assistance with parole board hearing preparation. A lot of people don't understand the depth of that experience. There's a lot of preparation that goes into that, and we assist with those things, and we help people get ready spiritually and mentally for the roller coaster. And in addition to that, we do advocacy whenever policy is in place that puts incarcerated women's well-being and physical safety at risk.
Okay. Amie, thank you for that introduction. And also, Dr. Irvine, let's go ahead and start with you. What can you tell the audience about your organization, the Women's Liberation Front, and the services that it provides? Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, okay. Try it now.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I was trying to be polite and mute myself at the beginning, and I might have hit it wrong. So
that's fine.
Yeah. So thank you for that great introduction. And it's always an honor and a privilege whenever Amie and I get to do an interview together, because I just have so many feelings of gratitude for her and the services she is providing to formerly and currently incarcerated women. I have sort of a whole background in working with incarcerated women, and I know some of the challenges that these women are facing, and Amie is providing absolutely essential and valuable services to women in California. So she is really an angel working for these women in California. So thank you, Amie. And I know we both really appreciate being here to talk with you. So WOLF stands for Women's Liberation Front, and you read out our mission statement at the beginning. And so what we do is we fight to protect and restore the rights of women and girls through three different strategies: legal argument, policy advocacy, and public education. So what legal argument refers to is lawsuits, as well as submitting things like amicus briefs to go along with certain lawsuits. So obviously we're going to be talking a lot more in depth about our major lawsuit tonight, so I won't get into a whole lot of details about that right now. So we do legal argument. Then we also focus very heavily on policy advocacy. And by policy advocacy, we mean sort of anything running the gamut, federal or state law, as well as if somebody wanted us to get involved with even some more like local policies, government policies, we could look into that. So for example, we do a lot of bill tracking. We have 4 focus areas. We spend most of our time fighting to abolish gender ideology. And what that means is we want to completely eradicate sex-based stereotypes. So we want, men and women, boys and girls to be living in a society where they're free from stereotypes about their sex. So we spend most of our time and energy focusing on fighting against gender ideology, but we also do care a lot about ending male violence against women and children, as well as ending commercial sexual exploitation. So prostitution, and then that includes pornography, which is a form of prostitution. And then we're also really interested in helping to protect women's reproductive rights. So we support abortion rights, and we oppose all forms of surrogacy, among other things, because we don't want women and children or babies being used as commodities, which is basically what surrogacy does. Right. So for all that policy advocacy, then what we do is we spend a lot of time tracking bills that have been proposed at the federal level and the state level, really bills that relate to any of our 4 focus areas. But again, this year we spent a lot of time on the gender ideology bills. So for example, like if a bill came up to keep women and girls sports protected, right? To keep men from infiltrating women's sports teams, we would submit testimony in support of that bill. So we keep a lookout for, any kind of federal or state bills about any of our focus areas. And then whenever we're able to, we'll submit testimony, oral or written testimony. Whenever we have the opportunity, we'll also submit public comments as an organization for like proposed federal regulations. So there was a lot of attention this summer about Title IX, again, focusing not just on women's sports, but this whole idea that students or college employees can get in trouble if they misgender somebody. So, we submitted comments about that proposed rule and said, why we think it's harmful especially to women and girls. And then we'll also do things like develop model policies. So, we'll write a model and give it to lawmakers and say, we think this is really great. We think you should produce your own bills based on this. So we have one that we developed this summer alongside a partner organization, and it's called the Women's Bill of Rights. So if people go to our website, they can see that as an example of a model bill. And then finally, we do public education as well. So that's like the form of webinars and writing blogs and really trying to help not just our supporters, but the general public understand all these really complicated and technical issues. Hopefully we're explaining it in a way that actually makes sense to people who, don't necessarily have a really deep working knowledge of government issues.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you ladies are doing some really important work. I'm fascinated by it, not only because I'm a father of 2 young girls, but I've definitely noticed a uptick in the level of the vitriol and violence towards women. And as a father of 2 girls, I have an obligation to do what I can to make the world a safer place for not only my girls, but also for women in general. So I'm really grateful to have you 2 on. And I hope to learn more about your policy positions and learn how I can be a part of the solution as far as changing the climate, the atmosphere. So Amie, I'm going to switch back to you. I understand that you and and the 2 founders of your organization, again, you guys were previously incarcerated, which is pretty unique. Can you share with the audience a little bit about the crime behind the conviction for which you were incarcerated? Can you share just a little bit of information about that, the highlights, I guess? Oh, you're muted too. I think what happens with the service is, there we go.
I was just trying to be cool too.
Well, I think what happens is if you guys mute yourself, I have to unmute you. It's weird. So, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Amie.
Well, my story, like many other women's stories, starts with a relationship. I was in a very toxic, very, very unhealthy relationship. Within 6 months, of meeting this person, I was looking at 25 to life. So that was just not emotionally well. I was not in, I wasn't well in general at all. And, it was 2009 and I was selling drugs, and my co-defendant decided that we were going to kidnap someone at gunpoint in broad daylight for $20. And it was it was an all day, all night thing. It was over $20. And if I had an opportunity to like personally apologize to this person, I'm sure she's traumatized every time she sees anything. But if that opportunity happens, it happens. But anyway, that was my first time getting arrested. That was the first time I had ever gotten in trouble, actually. And I was in complete shock. I had never really had consequences in my life, so I couldn't fully process what was going on or the level of seriousness of the crime that I had just committed. What I had done was kidnapping, and everyone I've ever met in my life who had ever been charged with that is still in prison, and might not come home for a really long time. So because of the fact that my charges were eventually worked down to criminal threats with the possession of a firearm, I know that was very unusual, and it was a blessing. And I need to use that to help other people, to prevent certain things like this from happening again, to do some outreach with vulnerable young ladies who are in similar situations and toxic relationships. And I feel very responsible for helping the women who are stuck in there, who did get life for committing very similar crimes to the one I did. It was, it was a very long night, and it could have been a lot better, but it could have been a lot worse, because there was a point where I thought it was over and she was gonna die. And I running out of the car and I'm like, oh no, this is we got to go now. And I took her, put her back in the car, and I said, I'm going to take you home. I got to take you home. I'm sorry. And I took her home, and she started taking her jewelry off and giving it to me, thinking that I said I don't want anything. But when I got arrested, that's robbery and all kinds of other things. So when I did initially get arrested, it was like a slew of violent felonies. So it wasn't looking good for me. And my first offer was 25 to life. So that state of mind that you're in, kind of, it does something to you when you know that you're looking at that. It still didn't sink in, the whole reality of this. It took until I was down to about 15 to life for me to really understand that I had done something horrible. And I was going to sit down for a while. And honestly, I wouldn't give the time that I did back. I wouldn't give it back if I could, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in the position to talk about and do what I'm able to do today. And they taught me so much about how important it is to take care of what the essence of being a woman is. That's what I learned from the experience. So I feel very obligated and like it's my duty to give back from this whole experience.
Well, Amie, I want to thank you for sharing that experience. I can tell that it was really difficult to share that life story. And I'm a big fan, believer in redemption and second chances. And when someone goes through, makes poor choices, it's important to learn from it. And I think it's pretty obvious that you were remorseful, you learned from that mistake, and you're a different person now. Luckily, I'm also a believer in that the worst thing that we've done doesn't define us for the rest of our lives. So I think it's important I'm personally believe in forgiveness. And again, I thank you for your candor and your honesty. And like I said, I'm judging based on what I've learned about you in a short time I've known you. This new chapter of your life, you're doing a lot of good things. You're doing a lot of life affirming things with your organization. So I commend you for that. And I look forward to using my very limited platform of 24, 25 subscribers to share this new chapter of your life. So thank you again for sharing that. Having said that, Dr. Oops, kind of briefly lost you there for a second, Dr. Irvine. So Dr. Irvine, I want to switch back to you. So while preparing for this interview, I was kind of like going through your website and kind of getting an idea as far as what's the focus and what's the mission of your organization. And there were a few phrases or words that kind of really caught my attention. And one phrase that really stood out was you want to halt male extraction of resources from female bodies and minds. Can you elaborate on that statement? Just curious.
Yeah, sure. I'm just laughing because we've got really amazing but sometimes poetic sounding language on the website, and in terms of public education we want to really kind of like explain to people what we mean by that. So I'm glad you brought up that phrase. Yeah, that refers to I mean, kind of broadly speaking, this notion that in a men and boys are valued so much more than women and girls, and girls are set up for rights to be viewed as objects for the taking in one way or another. So, you know, I mentioned earlier, one of the things we want to do is abolish commercial sexual exploitation, which is the phrase that we use for prostitution, pornography, stripping, camming, really anything like that, right? Where women and girls are in our society that their main value in life and pretty much their only value in life is their body as a commodity and their sexuality as a commodity. And they're taught that, you know, basically that's the way they're going to get ahead in life, is they can use their bodies and sell themselves. But in addition to that, when we're thinking about the various ways that men, you know, view women like as objects for the taking, you know, we surrogacy, right? And the other ways that women's reproductive parts are basically for, you know, donations and things like that, and really just horrifying stories about the surrogacy industry, even when it's marketed and touted as, oh, this is just, you know, this woman just wants, she gets paid really well for it, and she's just making it possible for these, like, for example, two gay men to live out their dream of being parents. It comes down to that we're talking about men taking advantage of a woman, basically essentially using her as a broodmare, using her as livestock for 9 months, endangering her body to carry a baby, and then after she gives birth, all legal access is cut off from that child that she's carried inside of herself. So those are just two examples. We could get into a whole discussion about intersections of, you know, capitalism and patriarchy and how women, you know, are paid much less for certain types of jobs. Women are often subjected to more menial forms of things like that as well. So, does that explain a little bit?
Yes, it does. I was kind of catching every other word. We were experiencing some audio issues here.
Okay.
It's not your fault. Sometimes when I have on really interesting guests, it seems like Comcast or someone is like determined to just ruin the experience. So
I am hardwired in, but I can see if the person in my household can stop internet usage. If that
I hate to inconvenience them. That might help, but let's keep going. I mean, if it gets really bad, I can always call you, and we can we'll just have the audio from this podcast. But let's keep. Are you hearing me? Okay, am I coming through okay to you?
Yeah, I can hear you great. But I'll turn off my video. You can keep talking to Amie, and I'll go get the internet usage stopped in the other part of the house. Okay, be right back.
Okay. So Amie, let's switch over to you. So going back to your organization, as far as woman to woman, for the average American that might see this podcast, why should they care about the issues highlighted by your organization?
Because they've got to remember that uh, you have to take care of the least of us. You can really tell a lot about a country by how well they take care of, or how well they don't take care of their prisoners. Um, the one of the biggest things to me to express to people is, if we don't care about what's happening to people inside of the prisons, and if we continue to let them be used and abused in the ways that are happening now, it's bound to happen to us sooner than later. This is the experimental, this is the grounds where the sociological experiments take place. This is where, this is their testing ground. And what the women inside right now are being um, exposed to, what they're having to live with daily, is nothing more than an experiment. And once we stop talking about it, and once, or if we stop caring, they're going to have their timeline for how long it's going to take to get people to forget about women out here too. So it's very important that people understand that is you. She is her. You. We are her. We. You know, the women inside are caring about them and making sure that they're not being abused is just like taking care of ourselves, because this is an extension of us. Um, I didn't realize how unpopular it really is. It took a few people telling me over the last couple of years, very seriously, that this isn't a popular topic and not everybody cares about everybody in their Amie. And I was so shocked. The first time I heard that, I was like, why? And then, second and third time, it finally started to sink in. Oh, that this isn't popular. That's why this isn't getting any traction. And and again, I feel responsible for this too. I want to help change the way incarcerated women are perceived. I want to bring the humanity back to that and take the dehumanization of them out, because there is they're held to so much of a higher standard. You shouldn't have been doing this, or you're a woman, how could you do this? People don't understand that this could have been you. You could have snapped one day, and this can happen, or accidents happen, abusive relationships happen. Nobody is trying their hardest to get to the pen. That's not how it works. And that's why I want to help tell a lot of these women's stories, so people can start to identify with the different kind of people who are inside, and they can understand that very well could be me. So maybe I should help make it a little bit less of a hellscape if I can.
Okay. So Dr. Irvine, I'm going to ask the same question of you. So I had asked Amie, why should the average American care about the issues highlighted by your organization?
Oh, well, we highlight a bunch of different issues, but I would say, generally speaking, and really all of them do tie back to gender ideology when you stop and think about it, right? Because sex stereotypes profoundly influence all of us. They influence males and females within a patriarchal society, just in some different ways. But there's actually, there's some great research and activism out there about how patriarchy harms men and boys, right? Locking them into very rigid stereotypes and ideas of what masculinity is. But patriarchy especially harms and disenfranchises women and girls in so many different ways. And I already talked about, women and girls being taught like they only exist for men's sexual pleasure and things like that. But, when we talk about wanting to abolish gender ideology, we want to create a society in which girls grow up believing that they are capable of being more than just locked into their bodies, right? That they're intellectually equal, they're mentally equal to men and boys, that and that structurally they're going to be given the same opportunities in life. They're going to be able to pursue careers that are of interest to them, and they're not going to be in danger every day of their lives. A few years back, the United States was actually listed as the 10th most dangerous country in the world for women and girls. And that's because of our outrageously high rates of intimate partner violence and sexual violence and stalking. So when we look at, for example, Centers for Disease Control, they report in their latest national study that 50% of all American women, so that's 1 out of 2, right? That's me and Amie sitting here. I don't know about Amie, but I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. So, that's 1 out of 2, every American woman has reported contact sexual violence, which means that they have been physically sexually assaulted in some way. That's not even talking about like sexual harassment, like the verbal sexual harassment. The statistics are similar for intimate partner violence, so women and girls go through their days from their earliest childhood sometimes, growing up knowing that there are men out there who are going to hurt them. And so at its core, when we're talking about fighting gender ideology, like we want to create a society where little girls can grow up and they're never going to be at risk of that harm, which is almost always being perpetrated against them by men. And that ties a lot into the prison population as well, because as I'm sure, I know Amie's aware, I'm sure you're aware, Woodrow, like the vast majority of women in prison are survivors of intimate partner violence or sexual violence, and they survive that violence before they ever set foot in prison. So by the time these women make it to prison, they have survived such extreme rates of brutal violence. Like it shocks me that they're still making it through every day. And so then they get sent into prison, and then they just have other huge obstacles facing them once they're inside.
Okay. So I agree with all your talking points there, Dr. Irvine. You're right. I'm curious to know, do you recall what organization would rank #1 in the survey as far as the violence toward women and girls?
Which country? No, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can find the article though and send it to you if you're interested in
Sure.
seeing
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah. Okay. So I want to revisit your website one last time, Dr. Irvine. There was this again. You talk about abolishing gender ideology. To what extent are you concerned that position can lead to gender confusion in young children or young adults?
So when we use the word gender, all that means is stereotypes about sex, like stereotypes about what males are supposed to be like and females are supposed to be like. So actually gender, those sex-based stereotypes, that tends to be, I think, what confuses people, because at our most basic level, we're just animals, we're males or females. We obviously have biological difference in terms of, reproductive capabilities, on average, looking at strength and speed and things like that. But I don't think that by seeking to abolish these sex-based stereotypes, we're actually trying to help humanity realize that males and females have the potential to be pretty much anything they want to be in terms of intellect, right? In terms of career, in terms of lifestyle choices, right? If somebody wants to stay home and take care of children, or if somebody wants to go work on an oil rig or become an actor, right? And those shouldn't be limited by the stereotypes that our society tells us. So rather than creating gender confusion, what we're actually doing is trying to cut through all that BS about gender in the first place and tell people that almost everything society has told you about being male and female, other than those basic biological differences, there's not a difference in terms of like somebody's artistic ability, right? Or in terms of somebody's ability to be good at math or science or something like that. All of those are stereotypes. And that's what we want to do away with.
Okay. So, Dr. Irvine, let me ask you this. Are there any bills going through either Congress or state legislatures that you're tracking closely that you support? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. So there was one that Senator Cotton released earlier this year, actually, that is focused specifically on, and I think the title of it is something along the lines of protecting female inmates or protecting female incarcerated women, something like that.
I think so.
And that's specifically a federal bill that was introduced to ensure that prisons will be kept single sex, so that males cannot be allowed to transfer into women's prisons. So we definitely support that one. There are several other out there, like on our website right now, about a variety of topics. Right now, in terms of the state bills, it's kind of quiet. Like a lot of bills are primarily introduced like in the springtime, so we don't have quite as many like targeted actions right now. But that one in particular, I think is really, really important.
Okay. How about you, Amie? Are there any bills that stand out to you that you're tracking?
That was the only, I liked that bill because it was very short. It was about a page, and I really liked the way they kept it really simple. I was so excited, like I was just ready for that one to rip. But there's a lot of bills I don't like. I mean, we're in California, you know. There's a lot of stuff that is unbelievable. But yeah, the only bill that I have like the biggest, most gigantic problem with is already passed. So, you know, I do pay attention to the ones that are putting the children at risk for permanent lifelong medicalization and castration and mastectomies at 13. I definitely pay attention to those. You know, aside from caring about incarcerated women, I'm definitely definitely concerned about what is happening to this generation, this young generation of kids. Is really just, I can't imagine how hard it is to be a kid right now. You can't even be a kid. So I pay close attention to those bills. I attend to some of those rallies. They just it's crazy. You would think that these would be issues that we would all unanimously be having a united front to protect the children from, and it doesn't. It's not. We don't.
And
So
Amie,
yeah.
oh, sorry, I was going
Sorry.
to say, Amie brought up the protecting children from the unnecessary medicalization, and so I just pulled up on our website. So that there is a federal bill right now. It's U.S. HR 8171, and it's called the Protect Minors from Medical Malpractice Act. And so we have a targeted action, which is basically an easy to use form on our website that people can send in messages to their lawmakers telling them they support that. And basically what that is doing is exactly what Amie said, trying to keep these children, you know, like we have all these stories now of like teenage girls who are like, Mom, Dad, did you know I'm a boy actually? And I was just born in this girl's body and I need a double mastectomy to help me live my life as a boy. And California actually is one of those states where it's making it really easy for young girls to get double mastectomies. And, you know, boys and girls to get shot up with different hormone treatments and drugs, and that they're going to cause infertility later in life, you know, these puberty blockers and everything. And it's really scary. You know, like people in this country, you're not allowed to smoke until you're 18, not allowed to drink alcohol until you're 21,
Right.
can't get tattoos and things like that, can't join the military. But a lot of lawmakers at the federal and the state level seem to think it's okay to have like teenagers and even preteens like having these long lasting, sometimes permanent changes made to their bodies. And it is really, really scary right now.
Right. And Dr. Irvine, I want to thank you for making that point. That was a very good point, because I personally share your concerns as a father. And I mean, as a parent, your job is to guide children and advise them, give them help, give them information to make really informed decisions. But as a parent, you want there should be a guardian or someone can step in and say, "Hey, no, this is not a good idea." So thank you for making that point, Doctor. I appreciate it. So let me ask you this, Dr. Irvine. To what extent do you think public K through 12 education is part of the problem? That's part of the problems that your organization is attempting to solve. To what extent are they to blame for the current situation or current climate?
Okay, so I definitely want to say well, I'll say personally, so Wolf we don't have any kind of an official stance on like K through 12 education in general, right? Or the role of teachers or administrators in a lot of ways. And I would personally say, like, I appreciate teachers and school administrators, and those are people who are often very underpaid and overworked and really struggling to balance everything. What we have seen, though, unfortunately, is gender ideology, and I'll just say flat out, like, propaganda of certain political ideologies that has very successfully infiltrated into, I would say the problem actually is starting out in higher ed and academia, has infiltrated into teacher training programs, so that we have people who are graduating with teaching degrees and they've been taught certain things. And so then they're being hired as employees and they think they're doing the right thing by advocating for certain policies in schools or talking to their students about certain things. So we're definitely have been seeing increasing news reports of sort of like leaked documents coming out of K through 12 schools, with parents starting to find out that there are school administrators in some states, some counties, different districts, administrators and teachers basically like sort of secretly transing children behind the scenes, right? So telling the kids, like, it's okay to keep secrets from your mom and dad. We'll call you this name at school and we just won't tell your parents you're going by this name. So those types of behaviors are really, really concerning. And one thing that we are very concerned about at Wolf is the silencing of professionals. So we know that there are a lot of students, there are a lot of counselors out there, there are school administrators who disagree with this gender ideology propaganda in the schools, but they're all very afraid of losing their jobs if they speak out. So it becomes a really complicated issue where we know that not everybody 100% agrees with this ideology that's being promoted, but they depend on their paycheck, right? So they end up staying silent and watching other people run the show. So, I don't want to say the entire school system is to blame or anything like that. It's really, really complicated, but it's very concerning to us when we've heard increasing numbers of stories, of kids being, I think it's actually fair to use the phrase grooming. It sounds very similar. Like, so my background before this job was in sexual violence response and prevention. And one of the basic things you talk to parents about, right, is like, adults should never tell your children to keep secrets from you. There should never be secrets, between adults outside the family and adults inside the family and your kid. And we're hearing increasing numbers of stories of school employees telling kids it's okay to keep secrets from their parents. Wow. And I think that is incredibly creepy. Very, very
I agree.
Scary.
Yeah. Okay. So, Amie, do you want to add? Do you have any comments or thoughts you want to add to that?
I really feel like all of this is motivated by the end goal of abolishing the age of consent. I feel like legislation is constantly trying to put a really deep wedge between the parent and child relationship. And in California, they're trying to say that the state knows better than the parent in so many situations. As a matter of fact, come over here from any state in the whole country and we'll give your child, life-saving, affirming healthcare by making them permanent clients of big pharma. It's that's not their job. That's not what they're here for. And if a child can make a decision about their body to actually remove functioning body parts, then who's to say they can't date an 85-year-old man? What is the difference? Yeah. And I believe, there's people that are elected officials that are working day and night to get closer to that goal every day. And it's not great.
Right. So that brings me to my next question. So are there any elected officials at the state or local levels or even federal level that you feel are good partners, that's supporting good policies, good bills that you guys can get behind? Anyone that stands out as far as good or bad? Any names?
I actually, since we're a nonprofit, I know that I'm not actually supposed to name certain names. So we will say that I will give a plug. for example, for our Women's Bill of Rights, I would encourage people, I can actually send you the website where people, your viewers, can go and look up their lawmakers to see if their lawmakers have endorsed the Women's Bill of Rights. So that would be one easy way to see if they're committed to at least acknowledging the reality of sex. But we definitely appreciate any lawmakers who are trying to protect certain single-sex resources and spaces. We're not arguing that everything needs to be separated by sex, because in fact, we want women and girls to be given equal opportunities. But sometimes, like bathrooms, sports teams, overnight accommodations like at hotels, domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, prisons, we want those to be single sex, just in order to protect the safety of women and girls. So any lawmaker who promotes those types of policies, we would definitely be giving a thumbs up to.
Okay. Amie, do you want to add on to that? Any thoughts?
I can think of a finger, but it's not a thumb. There's since that, being that I am in California, there are only there's under 10. I can't say anything either, can I?
I'll give you a pass on that one. You're right. I don't want to jeopardize your tax exempt status, so I'll move on. Sorry. Like I said, when I was preparing for this interview, I made this long list of questions that I thought my audience would want to know. So I'll move on. I don't want to put you guys in your exempt status in any jeopardy. So Dr. Irvine, let me ask you this. I'm a big fan of open data, transparency as far as how local and state governments operate, and the information that they provide to their taxpayers. Do you believe there's an adequate amount of relevant data being released by state and municipal governments through their open data projects?
So I'm not super familiar with various open data projects in all the states, but I would say we have major concerns, first of all, just about accuracy of data. So honestly, even if a state government was doing a great job releasing data, if that data has been intentionally obfuscated, right? Intentionally manipulated. And by that, I mean, and I believe California is one of these states where residents can go and change the sex on their driver's license, on their birth certificate, things like that, then they are misrepresenting reality, right? And so when we think about, like, my organization's interested in tracking like sex-based oppressions, right? How are women and girls like being discriminated against or being left behind in society? Well, what happens when we can't even rely on the government data that's being given to us telling us how many men and women are in a state in the first place? You think about trying to track like just the gender wage gap or something like that. There are all these crazy news stories now about trans-identified males. So these are men who are, dressing up like women, and they're now winning awards for like best woman CEO, right? Like best female entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so we're like, so this data is like, it's totally meaningless. So even if we're getting enough amounts of data, like we have major concerns now. And even at the federal level, there are some politicians who are, pushing to, actually the Social Security Administration, there was just an announcement the other day. People are able to change their sex on their Social Security cards now.
Oh, wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you think about like history, right? When we look back in 50 years, like we're not even going to have an accurate idea necessarily of how many males and females were in this country.
Wow. I think that's dangerous, actually, kind of irresponsible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to you, Amie. So having served time in California prisons, I was really surprised to learn that when you are released, you're only given $200, which doesn't seem like a lot if you don't have any outside connections to help you get back on your feet. So what are your thoughts on that? Are you aware of any efforts to increase that amount or provide greater support to parolees to ensure they don't reoffend or start engaging in behavior that's counterproductive, such as drugs, alcohol? Because $200 is just, you're almost setting the person up to fail, in my opinion. So go ahead, I'll let you respond.
However, when you've been making, 17 cents an hour for 7 years, that $200 feels pretty good. And this is also a big thing we're trying to prepare our sisters for when they're coming home. The financial literacy is vital because your sense of reality is completely warped. You come home and you think this $200 is really going to get you home, and it's not. almost, it's a tank of gas from here to LA, from Chowchilla to LA. It's not going anywhere. What I have heard in the state of California is that they were there was an effort to give people one of those safe usage bags, you know, with Narcan and you know, other paraphernalias to make sure people use safe. That was on the table at one point. You know, how we have those safe injection, safe consumption sites. That was an idea to make sure people had the tools necessary to not OD when they are released. That's why we do our best to make sure our people don't have to use that $200 at all. We pick them up. We're going to take them to lunch. We're going to make sure they have their toiletries and clothes at least for the next few days. And we do a lot of coaching. This $200 is not much, and you've got to start budgeting, and you've got to start calculating all these things in your head before you come home. You've got to think about your basic needs: toilet paper, feminine hygiene products, groceries, and you know, gas and a bus pass. And the $200 is it's, I mean, we appreciate it, but it is definitely not sufficient in helping you not reoffend. The recidivism is a result of the lack of resources you're just thrown out in the world with. You're not mentally prepared, and you're not emotionally prepared, and most people don't have, you know, a really strong support network. So what are you supposed to do other than reoffend or use or go back to other behaviors? Because there is definitely a need for familiarity. You want to connect with something that you are familiar with when you come home. That's why we're doing our best to make sure there's something familiar, there's that familiar lifeline, but it's healthy. Because once you see that person, or somebody can relate to you on a topic, it helps to calm you down. It's a really great grounding technique. Like, it's a relief.
Right.
And the state isn't thinking about any of that. It's very antiquated. It's very it's, I don't know when it was a good idea to just give people $200 and tell them see you next time. But it would be great if we could, you know, have an open discussion with legislation about rethinking that. They have more than enough money. So.
And then let me ask you a quick follow-up question, Amie. So I'm curious to know, to what extent your circumstances when you were released, to what extent were they representative of the average environment when parolees come out of prison? Like, because from what I understand, like I said, so people that have been incarcerated for 5, 10, 15 years or longer, a lot can change in that amount of time. Technology, just society. And I suspect a lot of people that have served those type of lengthy sentences have a hard time adjusting. So what type of support system do you have in place, and do you feel like that your circumstances at the time you were released are representative of what the average parolee encounters upon when they walk out of prison?
That's a really good question. As soon as I got out, my experiences were a little somewhat traumatic. You know, I came home and the grocery store was knocked down, and I didn't know how to use my phone, and I didn't know how to order coffee at Starbucks, and I ran out of Chipotle because the tables were stainless steel, and I started flashing. And I thought, if I only did 5 years, what is going to happen to my people that have done 20, 25, 30 years? They're going to be so triggered, so traumatized. So that's why I started, you know, making communication available. I started a private Facebook group that has 1,300 members in it right now of formerly incarcerated women, because I had no one to talk to. And I wanted to be able to speak freely about my feelings and my experiences without being judged in a, you know, semi-safe virtual environment. I wanted to be able to say something on Facebook without feeling like an idiot. Because once you ask for help for certain things so many times, and you're made to feel less than or like like bothersome, you're just not going to ask. You're going to shut down at some point. I did have a lot of support. I came from a two-parent home, and my dad's a retired sheriff, and they were just standing out there waiting for me. And that's not the situation for so many of my folks, even with, you know, the support of my mom and my dad right there cheering for me the whole time. It was difficult. So to complete a sentence without that is, it takes you to a different level of isolation and loneliness, because who cares about you? That's why I want to make sure they understand that we do, I do, my partners do. There are people that care, and you should definitely try and come home and run a good program, because there's something to come home to. There is a place. We're going to build it, and we're going to start building it before you even come home, because that's where, you know, the freedom and the redemption really starts. It's inside. You got to make sure your mind is right before you hit the streets, because life happens so fast that you want to be as prepared as you possibly can before you get to the gate. So
No, I agree. I was just going to add, it seems like the public attitude is changing toward people that have served time in prison. One piece of legislation, actually a law, parolees can now take advantage of federal education programs if they want to go to college and pay for their education. That's really like a sea change, in my opinion, because it significantly reduces the likelihood that these guys will reoffend. Well, women and men will reoffend. So that's great, and I'm really hoping that the public's attitude toward prisoners becomes less punitive and more conciliatory and more forgiving to help them get back on their feet. Because at the end of the day, no one wins when you just like continuing a practice of just like, okay, you've committed a horrible crime, you've done your time, or just go away, figure out life. And because ultimately, in all likelihood, statistics have shown these people are likely to reoffend. So I really applaud the work that both you ladies are doing, and I'm really hoping that that you guys continue to get the support, the financial support that your organization needs to achieve your goals and your objectives. So, Dr. Irvine, I'm going to switch back to you. Tell me about the lawsuit that you filed about a year ago. You filed a lawsuit on behalf of 4 female prisoners. Can you kind of just tell us a little bit more about that and the current status of it?
Yes, yeah. So just about a year ago, it was last mid-November 2021, we filed a lawsuit against the state of California, so specifically against the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR. And we filed it on behalf of these 4 women, Crystal, Janine, Tamikia, and Nadia. Yes, sorry, Nadia. So these are 4 women who are all incarcerated at a California prison. And they started to work with us, expressing their concerns because these men are being transferred in. So male inmates are being transferred in to women's prisons in California. And this has actually been happening for years now. And California actually wasn't really tracking and reporting that data in the way that many of us would have liked them to do. So the implementation of this law did not actually start the transfer of men, but it has brought it to more public awareness, and it's made it even easier for men to get into women's prisons. So the law is, we call it SB 132. It has a sort of lengthy name about its, sort of like the Transgender Respect and Dignity and Safety Act, something like that. And basically it's what it says in a nutshell. It went into effect on January 1st, 2021. And in a nutshell, it says that any incarcerated male inmate, prisoner who basically does not identify as a man. So he doesn't actually have to say he identifies as a woman. He might identify as non-binary or just transgender or one of many other gender identities that he says that he has. As long as he's just not a man anymore, he's eligible to put in a transfer request. And there are there have been hundreds and hundreds of men who have requested transfer, and quite a few of them have been transferred over. And like I said, there have been some men in California women's prisons for years already. This is also happening in some other states as well, but California really went with it in a big way by making it law. And so our 4 female plaintiffs had a wide variety of reasons for not wanting to have to share their prison cells and showers and bathrooms and common areas with these men. So, and I can get into more specifics about their stories, but yeah, in a nutshell. So we filed it last November, and apparently due to the backlog in court cases due to COVID, the COVID pandemic, we've seen very little progress on this lawsuit. And my attorneys say this is really weird. This is not normally how lawsuits progress. Usually they're supposed to, something's supposed to happen within a matter of months, but we're coming up on a full year. And we've had very, very little progress. We've had very little communication from the judge. And we just got a notice the other day telling us there might be another 6 months delay at this point.
Okay, interesting. So there's also, we're kind of running out of time here. I just want to get in maybe 1 or 2 more additional questions. So women and girls are going missing at epidemic levels in this country. Our country, I think you will all agree that we have a huge problem with missing persons. So can you tell me what efforts is your organization, Dr. Irvine, what efforts are you guys doing to combat this issue, if anything?
So that would fall into, our focus area of ending male violence. And probably there's a lot of commercial sexual exploitation in there as well. If the opportunity were to arise for submitting testimony in support of a bill to strengthen law enforcement investigations and things like that, we would definitely step up and support that type of a bill. We don't have any current lawsuits on that. So it's not something we've done a whole lot of work on, but it's absolutely something that we're very concerned about, because we know that, for example, if we just even look at women's pathways into prison, right? A lot of those women start off as runaway girls who then end up being preyed upon by, sexual predators, right? They end up getting trafficked. And so we could even eventually have some of these missing, women and girls. They started off as runaways, right? Fleeing from abusive homes, and they end up in prison, and people have lost track of them. So it's definitely a concern of ours, but we haven't done a whole lot of policy or legal work on that particular area. But we would definitely be open to it. So if any of your supporters have any bills that they want us to check out, they could definitely send them to us.
Okay. And then this question is really for both of you ladies. Assuming there's men and boys that want to help advance your organization's agenda, what advice will you offer them as far as men, boys that want to partner, help implement the agenda advocated by your organizations? What advice do you have for them? Let's start with you, Dr. Irvine, sorry.
Yeah, sure. I would say we actually have many, many supporters, and a lot of them are men. We have male donors. We have sometimes some male volunteers. We had a great male intern, a law school intern last year. So there are definitely people who, contribute to us financially, or who contribute to us by helping us write content and things like that. So there are people, if they wanted to get actively involved that way. Also simply helping us educate people. So if people have, there are men and boys who have social media accounts who want to start up the conversations. We are really just, trying to focus on changing culture. And, obviously we're trying to do that through law and policy, but we're also trying to do that through normal everyday conversations. Just earlier today, one of my staff members and we had a brainstorming meeting with a guy. He's very concerned about sort of the erasure of women in his profession, so to speak. And so he met with us, and we're coming up with a petition. We're putting together something for him. And he was talking about how he has a wife and a daughter, and he's so upset at what is happening in his industry right now, because he sees them making extra challenges for his wife and daughter. So, I would just always encourage men to think about, they all have at least a few women in their lives who they care about. And so, sometimes it helps for them to personalize it. And I would say, particularly, the issue of commercial sexual exploitation, I would encourage any man and boy out there to really think twice and do some soul searching if he currently consumes pornography. Pornography is the sexualization of violence. It's the sexualization of abuse, and it is incredibly harmful. It is basically filmed sexual violence against women and children.
Right.
And it's causing massive damage to people on the individual level as well as their relationships. It's absolutely horrific. And I would say that's one of the number one things every man, boy in America can do right now is to stop watching porn and tell their friends to stop it.
Okay. So Amie, I'm gonna let you have the last word on this podcast. So what are your thoughts on that question?
Just call me. I mean, if there's men and boys that want to jump in, just give me a call. We could use all hands on deck. Whatever you want to do, it probably needs to be done. We don't have like any kind of grants or funding at the moment. We are dependent on our not on nothing actually. Hopes and prayers, and it's gotten us this far. Since almost, gosh, how long has it been? About a year and a half, and we're still trucking along, trying to figure things out. But we could definitely use any kind of help. We have Christmas caroling at the prison gates coming up, and it'd be great to have some male voices out there. Maybe they'll hear us this year. But everybody, this is a human rights issue, and we need men to know what's going on just as much as women, because these are your sisters and your moms and your wives, or these are, we need men to equally know that this is an important issue that we could use help with, and we'd be happy to have them.
Well, you can count on my support. I'm not much of a singer, but I'll try to carry a tune.
Great. We're gonna pick really easy songs this year. Don't worry about it, okay?
Okay. Well, ladies, I want to thank you both for your time. Dr. Irvine, thank you so much. I know you're 3 hours ahead. I suspect you want to go home, get some rest. Look, you're home already, so get some rest. And Amie, my friend, thank you for sharing your thoughts, your life experiences. And also, like I said, by all means, keep in touch. Let me know how I can help. I want to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. So, like I said, I look forward to hopefully having you both on again in the very near future to share not only the status of this lawsuit, but also other initiatives you're working on. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, to my viewers, thanks for watching. Enjoy your evening and stay safe out there.